Good afternoon from the editorial board of the BuildUp portal. Welcome to this webinar. For those attending a BuildUp webinar for the first time, we are very glad to welcome you. For our returning audience, thank you for renovating your interest. This slide is to recall and give a brief explanation of what BuildUp is. BuildUp is a collaborative platform in the field of energy efficiency in buildings. It is continuously updated and it represents a key source of information on the topic of energy efficiency. You can register and become a member of the community, which allows you to upload news, events, present case studies, results from a project, and so on. We also invite you to simply navigate the portal. There in the Learn section, you will find all the podcasts of past webinars, so it is possible to listen and see previous presentations. At the end of this webinar, the link to the full presentation and the PDF deck of slides will be made available in this section of the portal. Upcoming webinars you can find in the calendar or the events section. It is a pleasure to host today's webinar entitled Catalysing the European Renovation Wave in the Transition to the Next Generation Energy Performance Certificates. This webinar will be moderated by Anita Dorjonets, Managing Director at REVA, the Federation of European Heating, Ventilation and Air Conditioning Associations, who will further introduce the agenda and the panelists. Now, just before giving the floor to Anita, I would like to invite you all to contribute and participate in this webinar. You can type and send your questions in the dedicated box at the right-hand side of your screen. We will bring these questions up at the end and hear the answer from our panel after the presentations. Anita, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Camilo, and welcome to everybody to this webinar. I'm Anita Dorjonets, as mentioned by Camilo, of an association of building service engineers. And thank you for BPI for inviting me to moderate this session and in general to put together these three projects to share the first outcomes and objectives of three projects about EPCs. So we are talking about the next generation about EPCs, which these projects have in their scope in different formats and focusing on different issues, which is a very complex issue. And if we look at the current EU level policy developments today, there is a wave coming, there is many waves coming, and that should be accelerated. And the renovation wave plans actually that should be a plan to accelerate the rate of building renovation in the EU significantly is coming up in the autumn. So we would like to explore the role that the energy performance certificates and schemes can play and should play in this context. Digitalization, of course, is the most important keyword of the entire construction sector. So in order to get the renovation rate done, in order to double the annual renovation rate of buildings in Europe, the entire sector must be digitalized and to be able to do this massive work actually that is ahead us. And EPCs could be and should be a tool that facilitate and help this across the EU. Of course, EPCs has a long history from the different energy performance EPBD directives, and they had also a bumpy road, we have to admit. So the the quality and reliability of EPCs varies across the European countries. So there is a need to tackle this, to gain trust, and at the same time, when we digitize and digitalize the EPCs to be the most of help for both policymakers and including also investors or those who finance the renovation wave, but also at the, let's say, the building and homeowners or people that are using and owning buildings. So I think these are the most important keywords that we should keep in mind when we talk about the EPC, that compliance with the rules and transparency on how the energy performance is calculated, and also transparency across Europe that can increase the trust and reliability and trust by the actual building users. Needs to be maintained and ensured and improved in the future, while steering the whole process of developing the next generation of EPCs, which is of course supported by the European Commission in these projects, the testing and demonstration. But of course, we have to upscale it using the best of the results of such projects that are here today to show. And to get the best and quickest possible results, maintaining quality and quantity at the same time, and also use it to help the renovation rate going and convince also building owners and investors about the need and quality of actually renovation. So the future should be actually an integration. Also some keywords about this. So how this next generation EPC should look like, what is in the scope of that. So it should be digital, of course. So it should maintain and gather data in a safe and again quality based way that is shared hopefully across Europe to some extent, so we can learn and we can monitor the process. It also should include new functionalities when we go digital, and also to answer some user demand as well. So it should show, it could show beside energy performance, of course, other aspects, and be more holistic. So for like comfort and indoor environmental quality be displayed in some way via EPCs is also an important aspect. Also to integrate the new policy tools and new approaches like the smart readiness indicator is also a new request to the next generation, and of course a move from actually move towards the measured data-based performance that indicates for the owners, for the users, in use performances in the buildings. So these are maybe the key let's say puzzle pieces that we should put together when we think about how to develop the next generation. And for this today, to give, let's say, this a landscape of 3 projects, QualDeEPC, U-Cert and X-tendo. We would like to show you what these projects aim at. So looking at the agenda, we will introduce briefly the concept of these projects, then by each project coordinator or representative, and then also we try to draw some common aspects, common challenges that these projects identified and face, and also some specific solutions that they propose. And then of course we give the floor for questions and from the audience. Our speakers today here with us is I go in the order of the pictures here. Is Lukas Kranzel from Technical University of Vienna with his colleague Ina Maya. They are both researchers in Technical University of Wien. And they will present the X-tendo project, and Stefan Thomas from the Wuppertal Institute representing the QualDeEPC project, and Simona Doka representing the U-Cert project from the Huygens Engineering consultancy company. And we have also here Jonathan Volt from the BPI, the Building Performance Institute in Europe, who will highlight these common challenges and based on the analyzing these 3 projects. So they are our speakers today, and then we just dive into the first session, which is just a brief introduction into these 3 projects. So we start with Lukas Kranzl from the Technical University of Vienna to talk about the X-tendo projects. Thank you very much, and Lukas, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Anita, for this introduction. As you said, I want to give a brief overview about the X-tendo project. So what is the main goal of X-tendo? It is to support public authorities to properly implement, well manage and organize next EPC generation. So that's quite broad. A little bit more concrete maybe. What does it mean? We want to demonstrate and encourage the rollout of next generation EPCs, and by that improve reliability, usability and convergence of practices and tools related to the next generation EPCs. We build our project on 3 pillars. The first pillar is we want to develop a toolbox including material, reports, good practice examples, guidelines for 10 innovative EPC features. We will test these features across Europe, and we will engage stakeholders, also trying to understand what is the need of the EPC end users, but also of the beneficiaries of the toolbox, which are basically public authorities responsible for EPC implementation and design. So I mentioned the 10 features. What are they? We have clustered these 10 features along which we structure our project into 2 categories. The first category covers innovative indicators, and the second category covers innovative data handling. And all the work that we are doing should follow 4 cross-cutting criteria, which are economic feasibility, user-friendliness, quality and reliability, and compliance with international standards. So this is our ambition. And now I want to go a little bit more into detail into these 10 features. The first group of the 10 features, features 1 to 5, are the innovative indicators. So first indicator, smart readiness, deals with the challenge that EPC should better reflect also the smart dimension of buildings. A second indicator, comfort. How can comfort aspects be better integrated? How could a comfort indicator look like? What are methods to include comfort also in EPC frameworks? Feature 10, outdoor air pollution. We know that in particular in Eastern European countries, outdoor air pollution is a hot topic, let's say, and buildings contribute to air pollution, but are also affected by air pollution. And in this feature, we want to elaborate an indicator trying to tackle this interaction. Fourth indicator and fourth feature, real energy consumption. We're all aware of the gap between calculated energy demand and measured real energy consumption. And it's a challenge to communicate this gap in EPCs. Within this feature, we want to provide approaches how to deal with this gap. And last but not least, in this group of features, district energy buildings usually are not completely standalone objects. They are usually integrated in a district. How can the possibility and of a building to interact with district energy system being reflected? And the second part of the EPC features are dealing with innovative data handling. First of all, starting with the EPC databases and how to improve quality assurance methods in EPC databases. Second, the building logbook. How can building logbooks be better linked to EPCs? Third, tailored recommendations. How can the tailored recommendations, which are already included and provided in EPCs, be improved? Feature number 9, financing options. How can EPCs better inform about financing schemes? And finally, one-stop shops. How can EPC systems better link to one-stop shops? So that's it. With that, I hand over to Stefan for QualDeEPC, please. Stefan, I cannot hear you.
So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Stefan Thomas from the Wuppertal Institute, and I'm coordinator of QualDeEPC. Let's check if I can move. Next slide, please. Yeah. QualDeEPC stands for High Quality Energy Performance Assessment and Certification in Europe, accelerating deep energy renovation. And this deep is also next to the quality found in our acronym QualDeEPC. Because the link between EPCs, next generation EPCs, and deep energy renovation is at the focus of our project, but it also aims at, in general, improving the quality of energy performance assessment and certification. We have project partners from 8 countries. Of which one partner from Belgium, Fedaren, is not implementing next generation EPC development and testing and dialogue work, but is helping us with the dissemination of the findings to not only the regional energy agencies that constitute Fedaren and organizing events in Brussels. Then we have 7 partners who do the development and testing and implementation work. EPC from Germany is also responsible for our communication and dissemination work. Here you see the logos of the partners and also some people at our first project meeting. Our objectives, as I said, are in general to enhance the assessment, certification, verification of EPCs regarding the quality and cross-EU convergence of EPC schemes. Second, but even more important, the link between EPCs and deep renovation. Our approach is that we first started with an analysis phase, and other than X-tendo, we only now, at the end of this analysis phase, defined the 7 priorities, similar to the 10 features of X-tendo, that we will work upon. And I'll present these in my second presentation in about half an hour. We're now starting the development phase, which is integrated with a testing phase, and to be finished at the half of the project next February. From there on, we'll go into the roadmap of national implementation and dialogue. So mostly a dialogue with stakeholders and authorities, but also implement what we can do, and wrap it up in a strategy for improving the convergence of the schemes in the 7 countries represented in our project, but also beyond to other EU member states. And of course, in parallel, the dissemination and public communication actions are running. And we will stimulate the changes by an intensive dialogue, 4 rounds of workshops, for instance, 2 EU events, then implementing consensus elements as far as we as project partners can do it. Many changes to EPC schemes, of course, need regulation or even legislation or funding. And then, of course, disseminate the findings to the relevant target audience. And you here see also our website. And this was the presentation on the background of QualDeEPC. And with it, I hand over to Simona.
Yes. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Stefan. So indeed, my name is Simona Doka. I am the U-Cert project coordinator. I'm a project manager and a researcher at Hagen Engineers and Consultant. So we are introducing today, during this webinar, the U-Cert project. Indeed, coordination and support action that started in September 2019 and will run until August 2022. The main aim of U-Cert is the introduction of a next generation of user-centered energy performance assessment and certification schemes. With U-Cert, we do have a strong focus on the strengthening of the actual implementation of the EPBD by providing and applying insights from a user perspective, and somehow trying to create a playing level for all the stakeholders that are involved in the implementation of the EPBD. Another important scope of U-Cert is to facilitate the convergence of quality and reliability of energy performance certificates. And this will be all facilitated by a holistic user-centered innovative solutions, including the Smart Readiness Indicator. In U-Cert, we like to talk about this transition path, so we can highlight mainly 3 main scope that we want to achieve over this 3 years of time. So first of all, full and smooth implementation of the EPBD and the energy performance of building standards under the aim, the mandate 480. The second is a user-centered design for facilitating and accelerating building performance improvement. And the third one, as I mentioned before, is the fact that we are strongly leveraging on the Smart Readiness Indicator to move from a asset rating to a operational rating. So indeed, when it comes to this first main transition path, is the full and smooth implementation of the EPBD under the M480 mandate. And for the one who doesn't know what is this mandate, is basically a task force for the elaboration and adoption of a standardized set of methodologies for calculating the integrated energy performance of building and promote energy efficiency in buildings in accordance to this to the recast of the EPBD. And a lot of information can be found about what we are doing in U-Cert with this regard in the EPB Center website, including a lot of supporting documents, as well as frequently asked questions, highlights, and documents. The second important transition path is indeed the concept of user-centered design. And with this, we will see this during the next part of the presentation and the webinar. U-Cert is strongly relying on the adoption of user-centered approaches, methodologies, such as ethnography and applied ethnography, to develop tools that are more user-friendly, also tailored toward the different stakeholders that are involved in the development and usage of energy performance certificates and assessment schemes. Not only for U-Cert is very important to take into consideration the occupants' behavior of buildings, as this has been proved by several studies as one of the key factors affecting the performance gap between calculated and measured energy consumption. And that is leading us to the third and final transition path for U-Cert, which is indeed the bridge of the energy performance gap by moving from a asset rating to a operational rating. And this will be made by the development of several tools to support operational rating assessments. As I mentioned, this will be discussed more in detail during the next session that is dedicated to common challenges. So I'm just going to leave the stage to Jonathan Bolt.
All right, thank you for that. And I do have control, thank you. As Simona said, my name is Jonathan. I work at BPIE, and we're one of the many partners in the X-tendo project. And I got the honor here today to present some of the common challenges that EPC still faces and that our different projects are addressing in different ways. And for you in the audience that followed EPC for some years, I'm afraid this will be old news and all things that you heard before, but the truth is that these challenges do still persist, and I think it's worth repeating once more at least. So the common challenges that I will go through today are different EPC approaches across the EU, and reliability and quality issues related to the EPC, sometimes a limited understanding of the EPC and what goes in there. The EPC data, we have the same problem there as with the EPC certificates. There are different approaches which makes integration difficult. And then finally, the renovation recommendations, which still are too generic and not focusing on deep energy renovations, which you guys know that we will need to ride this renovation wave in a good way. I will start here with and the different EPC approaches across the EU, and this challenge could be divided into several sub-challenges if you so wanted, but it basically stems that that member states, the 27 or before 28 member states, have implemented EPC in different ways, and sometimes we even have regional varieties of EPC frameworks. And this makes comparable or comparability across borders very difficult. And with that comes the EPC softwares and data gathering methodologies. They also differ. And this is a number I got from one of the projects here. That there are more than 30 different calculation methodologies in the EU. I think the overall is the complexity of this, because the calculation methodology of each member state often relates to their national context and of course to a long culture of checking their building and their building performance. And this is one table showing this. It comes from the U-Cert and more specifically the EPB Center, and it shows that there are many options to tailor the national calculation methodology for the different member states and regions, and this an example of this, for example, the number of users can be calculated differently. The climate, of course, differs in different countries, as well as different building typologies and building traditions. But I would say that there has been, as Simona said, there are some actions taken to address this and to take steps towards harmonize the calculation methodologies across Europe. And in the last amended EPBD, I think in the Annex 1, I think they asked the member states to explain their national calculation methodology in relation to the common standard of ISO 50200 series. I won't dwell on that because that is really not my expertise. And maybe even bigger nut to crack is the reliability and quality of the EPCs. And this is something that I think hampered the instrument since it was introduced some years ago. And I think the problem is twofold. It's of course that in some countries the EPC costs less than 20 euros, and therefore the quality of the data and the recommendations in the EPC are not that good. But in other countries, they spend a higher amount of cost, and then you can afford to really do an on-site visit and check everything, and therefore develop a better quality EPC. But I think the other side is also that people have a limited understanding of EPC, which is the next challenge, and they don't really understand why, for example, they got an EPC E when their neighbor with the same building, at least from the outside, has an EPC C, and they can't make that connection in their mind. But the problem here is that with the limited reliability and quality, it will be difficult to add all this extra next generation EPC features and functions that we discuss and that we are developing, because they will build on this central aspect of EPCs, and if the quality there is limited, so will the rest of it be. I would here just say on the graph you see here, you see we asked in a previous project, Zebra 2020, how real estate agents view the reliability of EPC in their countries. And they did this survey in 7 different countries, and you see in the top bar that in average it was only 5% of the real estate agents that thought that the reliability is definitely high. Another 22% said it's rather high, and the rest said it's either medium, low, or definitely low. And of course, with this large section that thinks it's not reliable enough, it's a problem. And these quotes here say more about the public acceptance of EPC, and it differs in many different countries. Flanders is the only really positive one here, and I think that is related to the work they have done with EPC and their EPC framework during the last year, really increasing the awareness and people's understanding of the instrument that has gained some results. And I will move to the next slide, which then focus on the limited understanding. And it is, of course, related to that people in general have a limited understanding of energy efficiency, as well as different U values and different calculation that goes into building performance. But also how it's being presented to the building owner is another part of the story. How user-friendly and how well explained this complex methodology and metrics have been, and how well it's presented in the different EPCs. And you see here an example of 10. It's just the first page of 10 different EPCs from different countries across Europe, and you see the common aspect is basically the A to F grading scale with different colors. But then it includes a lot of different information. Some of them are very easy to grasp the main story. This is a EPCD, while others requires more time for the person to really understand. I will move on to the next slide, and that relates to EPC databases and EPC data in general, and just as with the energy performance certificates, this is done very different in the different member states. And also in some countries they have a regional database, in other countries they have a national database. But the problem here is that if we would like to integrate everything into a European database, say the Building Stock Observatory or something similar, which has been done with the Building Stock Observatory. But the problem is that because there hasn't been a harmonized calculation methodology, and we haven't harmonized how the data is inserted in a building database, the same thing can be described in many different ways in different countries, which makes comparability even more difficult. You see the table here. It shows that it's an exercise we did for X-tendo, and we asked the different countries we work with what kind of data do they store in the database in their countries. And you see that all countries store information on the buildings, general data of the building, so the address or the year, for example. And most countries include energy performance data, so data fields that goes in to calculate the EPC class, basically. And almost all countries also include current EPC class or EPC rating. About half of the countries include information on the potential EPC rating, so if the renovation recommendations that are listed in the EPC, if they were to be implemented, what EPC label would the building get? And just a couple of EPC databases include information on indoor environmental quality, which of course is, if not at least important to the homeowner as the energy performance itself. So that is also a potential for improvement, I would say. But I think for the EPC databases, I write here a missed opportunity, and I think there are a couple of countries, Denmark, Flanders, and also Portugal, that have taken steps during the last years to really explore the potential of having a database of the building data. You get a better overview of the building stock in the country, of course, but you can also attach different services that can be used to the building owner. In Denmark, for example, they have a very elaborated EPC database and also another database of other building related data, which both are open to public use. And the public one-stop shop, they basically made it possible for people to just insert their specific address or your neighbor's address if you want, and you get all this detailed information about the building. And what is cool is that you also, based on that, you also get first information on what kind of renovation measures you can take. It is, of course, based on the available data, but they see, okay, you haven't changed your roof for 20 years, so maybe that's a good idea. And they also indicate what would be the payback period for doing this. And that relates really much to the last challenge I will highlight here today. And in each of the EPCs, they need to include renovation recommendations, so measures the building owner can take to improve the energy performance of their building. And here the main problems are two-folded, or I mean, they're interlinked, but the main problem is that too often still, even if this has been improved, the renovation recommendations in the EPCs are generic. They're either copy-pasted or they come from a limited list that the energy experts select from. And the second problem, which may be even larger, is that the recommendation presented are often not for deep renovations, and that can lead to that you lock in future cost-effective measures that could have been possible if you implemented the different measures in the right order. And that is And then other problems or link problems is that are the recommendations, are they visible for the homeowner, or do they need to search for them? And do they link the information in the EPC to further information for implementation? In this map, as you see here, it's come from the QualDeEPC project. They did an exercise where they checked for different things related to EPC recommendations and deep energy renovation recommendations. And all the countries marked with green, they have some kind of online tool or decision support mechanism for energy efficiency renovations, for where the building owner can go and seek further information for their building and what kind of measures they can implement. You see the one with, there's a few countries with dots, I think France, Belgium, and Sweden. They have an online tool that compares energy consumption per EPC with market average. You can compare your EPC with your neighbor, for example. And before I go on to summarize everything, this is another exercise that QualDeEPC project did, checking the current status of embedding EPCs in wider policies and public activities to stimulate renovation. You see the first here, they found that 5 different member states have EPCs and renovation recommendations that are linked to detailed energy audits. So that it's especially, I mean, doing a close energy check is especially important if you want to come up with good recommendations for deep renovations. And the second one said that there are only 3 countries where there is a mechanism for monitoring the implementation of the recommendations given in the EPC. There are 7 countries that have an asset rating EPC that are mandatory before and after renovation, which is often a requirement for financial grants in some countries. And there's also 7 member states that have made a link between the EPC and one-stop shops, which is something we explore in a couple of these Horizon projects as well. And this is my final slide. It shows the strength or the focus of the 3 different Horizon projects. And on the left side, you see the common challenges. They are now 7 instead of 5 because a couple of them have been divided. But basically, you see here that we have different strengths going to the different or addressing these issues. You see that U-Cert, they're doing a lot of work on how we can harmonize methodologies and some calculation things across the EU. In X-tendo, we explore or we put a lot of focus on the new features that EPC can include, such as the use of EPC databases can be linked to one-stop shops, it can be linked to digital building logbooks and building renovation passports and so on. And the QualDeEPC do a couple of things, but I think their main focus is on how to link EPC with deep renovation policies. And this is just to show that we are better together, and therefore I like that we have this common webinar here today, and we also do collaborate more in the future. And now I will leave to more tailored solutions. You will hear how the different projects are addressing these different challenges. And I think the first presenter will be Ina from Tübingen. Thank you for me.
Hello, everybody. So thanks, Jonathan, for your presentation. I'm happy to present in the next few minutes the solutions that we propose in the X-tendo project. As my colleague Lucas said before, we have 10 features in the X-tendo project. For each, we will follow the same approach. But today, to make the presentation a little bit more concrete, I will give the example, I use the example of the feature 6, the EPC databases. So the main X-tendo outcome will be the toolbox, which is a freely available online knowledge hub that will also be continued beyond the project time. And here in the screen, you see a screenshot from our website. In the top, you see a short description of the feature, and below the structure that will be then filled over the project time with the material that will develop. In the feature 6, we developed a method for the quality assurance of the EPC databases. So we are checking the input data of the EPCs in the databases. We also will develop a method to provide a learn cycle of feedback loop to the energy auditors back. So the aim is to learn them and help them to avoid repeating the same mistakes. The two levels are the first one is a bit broader, where it's first checked if there are empty fields in the EPC or if the values are negative and so on. And in the second level, we have a more narrowed down approach where we will identify and classify the building stock in different types and set then threshold values for the buildings. The calculation procedures will be provided in an open source Python code, and together with the recommendations for the implementation, we will describe the calculation methods implemented in the code. We will provide guidelines how to run this code, also to determine some technical specifications of the interface between the national and the regional databases, also taking into account the country specifications that will be developed over the project. The whole material provided in the toolbox will be tested and demonstrated in the project. We have mainly 3 different types of testing. We will have the in-building testing in real existing buildings, focus on the innovative indicators. Then we will have the system testing, where we'll test new technical approaches, more focus on the innovative handling data. We also have the using testing based on end user service. Each feature will be tested in different countries. So we'll have a country-specific demonstration of applicability. And during the method and the development and the testing, the implementing partners, together with the feature leads and with the feature experts, they have the opportunity to share their experience and know-how on the specific feature topics. And at the end, our main target is to do an estimation of an EU-wide replicability potential. You might have asking yourself, but where this testing phase will be, which will be the implementing countries. So we have 9 implementing partners: Austria, Denmark, Estonia, Greece, Italy, Poland, Portugal, Romania, and UK, represented by Scotland. And in each of these countries, the national energy agencies or energy agencies are then responsible for the testing. Yes, so thank you from my side, and now I give the words to Stefan Thomas to present the solutions from QualDeEPC.
Thank you, Ina. Yeah, here we are. So I presented before our general approach, and like to give a little more detail about the approach to solutions that we are following in the QualDeEPC project. As I said, we have just finished the analysis phase with the analysis of existing schemes, good practice, shortcomings, and priorities for improvement. We started with more than 40 potential improvements for an enhanced next generation EPC scheme. You've seen some of them in Jonathan's presentation. We had stakeholder interviews, we had national workshops, and now have defined 7 priorities, which I will briefly present in a minute. And now we're starting to develop the concrete proposals and tools for these 7 priorities. We'll also test, as far as it is possible to test, with 10 to 15 buildings and their owners in each of the 7 countries. So our approach is to test all the proposals and tools in the same way in the different countries. So this development and testing phase should be finished early next year in February. And then work package 5 includes the adaptation to the country needs, the implementation of some consensus elements that can be implemented by the partners, who are either national energy agencies or experienced consultancy companies. And we'll have a next round of workshops, and what can't be solved and led to a consensus in the dialogue within work package 5, within our project, will be written into the roadmap for further development and dialogue. And finally, we'll conclude everything to a sustainability strategy for continued implementation, conclusive policy recommendations, and further dissemination, and also EU-level dialogue and transfer. So what are the 7 priorities that we now will focus on? The first 3 are focusing on the core of the project, linking EPCs and their recommendations to deep energy renovation. And the first step, obviously, is to improve the renovation recommendations that are provided on the EPCs so that they are leading the user to deep energy renovation. So we'll develop a concrete set of these recommendations with a focus on residential buildings. And deep renovation, the Commission has defined 60% of savings. We also link this to the nearly zero energy building requirements. Then you've seen the graph. There is a number of countries already having an online tool for building owners to compare the recommendations that they receive on the EPCs to a neutral source of renovations that may lead to deep energy renovations. And we aim to improve that or build new such tools that clearly recommend deep energy renovation actions. So we'll develop a master tool adapted to national situation and language, but it could be a new or improvement of an existing tool. The same improve an existing or build up a new one goes for what we call the deep renovation network platforms, which could be understood as one-stop shops that mainly address the building owner, plus the networking of supply-side actors. And it could be either an online platform or a physical hub. There are similar things already in some places and countries, but not everywhere. And what is there could also be improved. Then the other 4, the first one is looking at the training, which could also be improved. And we will focus again here on elements with a focus on deep renovation recommendations. but also will work on a policy proposal to make such periodic training mandatory where it is not yet existing. Then we've seen that the EPCs are often confusing and not very user-friendly, but making it something useful for the building owner and also the tenant or buyer is very important to achieve impact. This is broader than recommendations, but of course the renovation recommendations and links to further information is also something we will include in any case. And the final two are also aiming at improving the use of EPCs and hence the usefulness here for the building transactions. The EPBD requires that the data on EPCs are used in real estate advertisements, but our impression is that the compliance and control is not perfect everywhere, let's say it like this. So we'll take a look at good practice and come up with a concrete proposal how these routines of control and enforcement could be improved, but also compliance could be improved through more support and intrinsic motivations. And here the priority 6, the voluntary or mandatory advertising guidelines that will help the building owner to present it in a way that is easier to comprehend for the user, can be useful. So this was the solutions from QualDeEPC, and so I have the pleasure to hand over to Simona again.
Yes, thanks, Stefan, again for your introduction. So we're talking about the U-Cert solutions next 5 minutes or so. So the first important solution that we are developing in U-Cert is the addressing of the energy performance gap, and especially the development of methodologies for moving from building asset rating to operational rating when it comes to energy performance certificates. So we know that right now in Europe, based on the Energy Performance of Building Directive, there are more than 34 different calculation methodologies to assess energy performance certificates in the asset rating in the different member states. So as we discussed before, one of the key objectives of U-Cert is developing convergence through this set of national annexes for the U-Cert asset rating. These converged set of national annexes can be, we say, denormalized in a way to provide sort of tailored rating. And this would allow, first of all, cross comparison, for instance, with the different national asset rating, but also providing a sort of harmonized final results to process and to move to the next step when it comes to building operational rating. So this is the first part, trying to harmonize practices and methodologies when it comes to asset rating in at the member state level, which is already a very important aspect of U-Cert. And this is a sort of propedeutical word to move then to the as measured operational rating. This exercise we are trying to do has the main objective of course, providing valuable information in a way to be successful when it comes to bridging the gap between calculated and measured energy performance. but also serving as a sort of indexing of the sensitivity of building typologies or robustness of building designs and building installations for different usage and use patterns, depending on, again, building typologies, building installations, but also occupants' behavior. So that is for us one of the key results. And so moving from building asset rating to the U-Cert operational rating. Talking about the operational rating per se, we know that continuously calculating building operational performance based on major data would allow to improve building energy performance, but also when it comes, for instance, of planning renovation steps to somehow keep control of the different improvements of single renovation packages, for instance, or renovation measures. The U-Cert building operational rating will be developed as an online tool that could be as a sort of cloud-based services that could be accessible by any web browsers with a user account. This operational rating tool is designed in different steps, depending on, let's say, the knowledge that the user has about the building energy performance per se and building certification schemes. So as you can see here in this slide, we identified three main calculation methodologies. So the calculation methodology A is somehow a quick online scan of the building operational rating, and this can be done, for instance, by simple users that are not extremely experts, so can be also self-assessed with no certificator behind by the building occupant or the building operator. The second step is a little bit more complex operational rating methodology that would involve somehow a on-site inspection of the building with a checklist approach covering and following the SRI methodology, so the smart readiness of indicator of building. And this type of assessment should be provided by a sort of qualified expert. And of course, it might take a little bit more time. The final step, which is more comprehensive, is the in-use smart building performance operational rating. So this is indeed the real-time operation assessment. Of course, this type of assessment will require data coming from the building, so to say that we could be able to assess real-time building performance and real-time occupants' behavior performance when it comes, for instance, to interacting with control systems and the building itself. And this comes to the third and, let's say, last key results or solution for us in the U-Cert project, which is the ethnographic research approach. We have been using these methodologies for several projects, and indeed the idea for U-Cert is to support the next generation of user-centered energy performance certificates. So one of the results is a catalog of users of energy performance certificates that we mainly divided between expert users, for instance, energy performance certificates, assessors, or policymakers, and from the other side, users. So building managers and the building users, building occupants, building owners. The idea that by understanding the users' perceptions about EPCs, expectations, need, drivers, barriers, both from the demand side and supply side, then we'll be able to deliver a new generation that is more tailored and more user-friendly. So this was the final slide for the key solutions of the U-Cert project. So I think I'm just gonna hand over the discussion again to discuss the question and answers.
Thank you very much, Simona, and to all speakers for the excellent presentation and also keeping the time schedule. And thank you to the audience for the activity and the questions we received. So I would start with the questions regarding an EPC database. So the EPC database table in the presentation of Jonathan doesn't mention the Netherlands, is the question. Why is it so?
To me, yeah. No, basically we covered the countries in the status quo report we did some months ago in X-tendo. We covered the countries that are involved in the project, so basically the target countries. And unfortunately, Netherlands is not involved, so that's why.
Thank you. Then a question to Simona on U-Cert. How would the SRI fit in the EPC? How does it relate to measure, and how can it relate to measure building performance and operational rating?
Well, of course, when we rely on SRI when it comes to understanding which are the most important parameters to take into consideration for developing the building operational rating. That's for us a sort of blueprint of what it's extremely important to be taken into consideration. So indeed, that's the way also the SRI is supporting the building operational rating in U-Cert.
Thank you. Then another question also to Simona, that there were EPB Center was mentioned in one of the slides of Quantum. What is the EPB Center?
Yeah, so that's an important question. So the EPB Center is let's say, a service center for information and technical support on the new set of EPB standards. And so the scope of the EPB Center is to develop a group of internationally harmonized and coherent set of energy performance of building assessment methods. So that's indeed a center that has been developed to fulfill the aim for under 18 mandate. So that's really a dedicated center in that sense. It also works a lot in the context of not only defining the assessment methods, harmonizing the assessment methods, but also making sure that these methods are used. So communication and dissemination is extremely important. So that's also the reason why a lot of the material produced in U-Cert is presented in the EPB Center website that is indeed a facilitator for U-Cert.
Thank you very much. And then a question to the QualDeEPC projects. There were the priorities identified and by the project, and how was this definition of priorities done?
Thank you. Already in the proposal phase, we drew up a list of more than 30 potential improvements by looking at publications, for instance, of the concerted action on the EPC, on the EPBD. When we started, it grew to more than 40. And then we looked at what is already implemented where. So if it's already standard, we don't need to work on it. We did stakeholder interviews in the 7 countries to see what people think is an important feature or what they think is a priority to be improved. Also, how easy they think it could be implemented. From that, we narrowed it down to a long list of some 18 or 20 potential improvements. And this then was the basis for the national workshops, and also some further analysis and discussion within the team, so that in the end we identified these 7 priorities.
Thank you. Then to a next question, there were 2 questions about the end user approach. So how it was mentioned that the focus of understanding the end user is important. So how can this be implemented? That's one question. And the other one is specifically on U-Cert. What does it mean in the context of U-Cert, that it is user-centered? What does it mean in practice?
Yes, well, for us in U-Cert, the concept of being user-centered can be it's twofold mainly. So from one side, the energy performance certificates and assessment needs to be simplified and needs to be tailored towards the users. So, and when it comes to users, we're thinking about demand side and supply side. So there is quite extensive work we're doing when it comes to understanding the final users' visions, perspectives, needs, when it comes to labeling schemes or the visualization of the EPC. How can we make this more attractive also for them in a way that the uptake and the usage will be more widespread? And that is the one side of the concept of user centricity in U-Cert. But the second one, which is also extremely important, is to understand that one of the key elements, one of the key parameters that influences the gap between assessed certification or energy performance certification and the operational one is users' behavior, is occupants' behavior. And there we know that there are a lot of experiences, also other European projects that are dealing specifically with assessing occupants' behavior and raising awareness through data. And so for us, through U-Cert, we would really like to include also this human factor when it comes to building operational rating.
Thank you, Simona. And maybe Lucas, now you could also add
maybe
something.
I can also say something about this. The question how we take into account the end user perspective in X-tendo. So we have been just completing a survey covering 500 households in 5 European countries. And we asked specific questions targeted towards our 10 features for understanding better what is important to end users in developing this feature. And so just one example was that it became quite clear that for the tailored recommendations, economic aspects are very important. So in all countries, this was the highest ranked response from the end users. They want to know about the economic feasibility, about the costs of the recommended measures in the EPCs. And so we have results for each of our 10 features and try to incorporate this now in the development process of each feature.
Thank you very much. And then some more, the general question maybe to the panels. So how can now the EPC be used by policymakers to trigger and monitor, control the renovation wave? So basically the general topic of our session today. So maybe I will ask Jonathan first, and then ask also the other panelists if they could answer.
Yeah, sure. I would say basically twofold. That the first way it can contribute to the renovation wave is of course to bring information to enable policymakers to really understand the building stock and what is needed, and also to related to that also feed into the country's long-term renovation strategies as a source, as a basic source for information about the building stock and its needs. And then the second part I would say is that with EPCs, it's possible to attach various requirements. And we saw in one of the graphs I showed from the QualDeEPC project, is that 7 countries linked EPCs already now to financial instruments and often grants. And so you need to show that you can get a grant, but then you need an EPC before and after and prove that you did a measure. But this is also possible to take forward, for example, when it comes to mandatory minimum requirements for existing buildings, as they have in the UK, for example, with they set the minimum EPC standard for landlords when they're renting out apartments, that it should be at least EPC E, I think, or F. And the same in the Netherlands now with office buildings, they need to comply with EPC level C. And I think when it comes to new progressive policies, I think EPC could be one of the infrastructure that could enable and facilitate this.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else from the panel to add thoughts?
Yes, Anita, this is Simona from the U-Cert project. I think, well, it's extremely important that the new generation of energy performance certificates are more user-friendly, more user-tailored, harmonized among member states will be developed. And specifically when we think of energy performance certificates that are not just based on asset rating, but are definitely based on the real-time performance of the building, that would strongly, extremely support the trust towards, for instance, renovations, especially when it comes to deep renovations, where a lot of technologies are involved, where we know that the process and the customer journey for designing a renovation, installing specific technologies, and also monitoring after use, it's still one of the main main barriers for adopting this renovation techniques and solutions. So we like to think that not only U-Cert, but all these projects like QualDeEPC, X-tendo, if come to force, could really create a sort of capitalization of results that could be used for either supporting further projects or supporting policy making or new actions that would support indeed the European renovation wave. And I strongly believe that there are elements that we have in common among these projects, such as indeed supporting reliability, supporting knowledge, technical knowledge about methodologies, and understanding the user's needs, again, through questionnaires or through different user-centered practices that would definitely support the renovation wave in the next years.
Thank you very much, Simona. Then
Ina, can I add something? Or
yes, sorry, Ina, yes, go on.
yes, I really like this idea of the end user as target of the EPC, and the EPC being an instrument to kind of translate the technical aspects in a way that the end users are supported in their decisions. But what I also see in the role of the EPC, and also when talking about the public authorities, is, which we should not forget, it's the achievement of the decarbonization targets of the building stock. So I think Jonathan mentioned in his presentation the tailored recommendations in the EPCs are sometimes not focused on the deep renovation, and I think this is a very important point that we should not forget, because if we miss this opportunity, we will have a lock-in effect that it might be after that too late to achieve this target. So that's my point of view on this. Thank you.
If I may add, exactly, this is why QualDeEPC has as the first of the 7 priorities to improve the recommendations, so that they are supporting and not contradicting deep renovation. And then, yeah, like all the projects are working to make the EPC the first step towards renovation. So we need to take care that the data gathered in the EPC is not lost, but becomes the basis for what could ultimately be a building renovation passport, and that the building owner or buyer is taken further with additional information on where to get in-depth advice and where to get finance for renovation, and for the advice and for support and implementation and other things, like with the one-stop shops. Yeah, so this is what we are working on, and keep exchanging also our preliminary results to really get a good compendium of improvements and tools that member states can use also beyond those who are participating in the projects.
Thank you very much. And maybe there is time for one or at least or 2 more questions. So one is about IAQ indicators. So which IAQ indicators are already included in the EPC in the mentioned cases in Greece and Portugal? I believe it was Jonathan. You showed such a summary table. Do you know?
Yes, thank you. I know that Lena from Greece is here, and she probably knows better, but if I remember correctly from this report that we did now some months ago, is that they basically indicate the thermal comfort of the building. So can it hold a good standard in warm summers, in cold winters, and they give an indication on the first page of this to the building owner. So nothing too sophisticated, but still, I think it's a first important step towards this indoor environment, which is very important to many homeowners and people that would like to purchase a house, for example.
Thank you. And then maybe the last one in 1 minute, if we can answer at all, if you are aware of any study that was checking the extent and the reliability of using default values for the EPC production across the member states, and how it is contributing into effective renovation policies. Don't know if you came across any similar studies or thinking.
We analyzed the use of default values in the member states in QualDeEPC, and in our deliverable 2.1 you can find the results, and maybe there is further literature which also includes assessments of the impact on reliability, but we didn't go into depth about this.
Thank you very much. So that was the time I believe that we had for today, and thank you very much again for the questions from the audience. I hope we answered everything, or if not, feel free to contact the project representatives that were here today. The slides or the recording will be available as usual on the Build Up portal. So thank you very much again for the panelists for their presentations and interesting thoughts that they shared with us. And I wish everybody a good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita, for the introduction and for managing this panel.
And thank you to Build Up for organizing it.